So I must please emphasize this, that all the panelists must please make their way to the sound desk at the back to get mic'd before the panel discussions. And also, once you are done with your panel, please go and get demiked, because don't go to your seat with the with the mic still attached to you. And if you can, when you can see that your panel is next or that you are closer to it, please do go to the sound desk at the back. Okay, so we're going to move right along, and this is our last panel before our break. It's the accessing finance and financial inclusion. And access to finance and financial inclusion for women entrepreneurs, issues and challenges. Boy, do we know there are challenges. And I'd like to call up our moderator, Vuyisa Qabaga, Partner Entrepreneur Traction South Africa. Please welcome her onto stage. Oh, him. It's a him. So I've got two little boys. That I absolutely adore. But in our home, we teach them how to, please come up, Lisa. I stress gender equality. I stress not speaking bad things about girls, not hating on girls. And so sometimes the first time, one day my sons were playing PlayStation, and I heard the older one say, "Don't pick the girl, she's lame," because there was a girl fighter to pick from. And I was like, you know what? For the next 2 weeks, both of you are going to pick the girl fighter. You're going to take turns. So it's actually not a bad thing to be referred to as a her. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good morning, everybody. How's your energy so far? Yeah? Can you say to me, shine, shine? I'm obviously very grateful to be here as a thorn amongst the roses, and incredibly privileged. So to say to Bonnie, I'm quite comfortable with my sexuality. I have two daughters myself. In fact, at some point in time, our kids went to the same school. That's how I know her. But basically, today's panel is we're gonna try and make it brief. So I'm gonna do a quick introduction, and I'm gonna have the honor of calling up Matabo Makene to do an introductory kind of remark, and for our panelists who will be joining us to also join us to then talk more about the power of digital and inclusive finance. But to set the scene for you, I think it's important that we all realize that financial inclusion in Africa is a very topical thing globally. And today in Kenya, 77% of Kenyans live within 5 minutes of a mobile money agent. With an adult finance penetration of 59%, in South Africa it's at 77%, Nigeria at 44%, in Egypt it's 17%, Senegal and Burundi are the lowest in the continent at 8%. Traditional branch banking access in Southern Africa is below 30%. So the entrepreneurs amongst you should probably be thinking, that's quite an interesting opportunity to explore. But with countries like Zambia, Malawi, Lesotho, and Zimbabwe seeing very low financial inclusion, governments are reluctant to pass legislation that frees up innovation in the financial sector. In Zambia, for example, MTN is still in talks with the central bank to allow it to offer mobile money. So without further ado, let me call up our first speaker who's going to give us context in terms of how we can drive financial inclusion, especially for women entrepreneurs on the continent of Africa. Matabo Gail Makenet.
Thank you, Vuyisa, for the invitation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Or shall I say shine? Thank you. So much has already been said about what I was going to present, but I will still go through the motion anyway. We are going to discuss financial inclusion, and here we're really going to look at what are the issues, the challenges, and then I will try and offer some remedial action. Remember, I'm coming from the regulatory point of view. I haven't heard of many other regulators in here, So what I will try and do is to give you some perspectives from the regulatory point of view. So let me pick up some of the challenges that, or the issues rather, that have already been highlighted. And I will start with something that we have had, the concept of missing women. According to Amartya Sen, missing women is a phenomenon whereby the proportion of women is lower than what would be expected if girls and women throughout the developing world were born and died at the same rate relative to boys and men. And this is as they do in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's about missing women. And then we look at sub-Saharan Africa, about 6 million women are said to be missing every year. And at birth, 23%. Early childhood, we're looking at 10%. At reproductive years, around 21%. And above 60 years, 38%. So why are these women missing? And we have had this already. We look at lack of access to opportunities, the first one being educational opportunities. For each missing woman, there are many more women who fail to get an education, they fail to get a job or a political responsibility than they would have otherwise obtained if they'd been men. Then we look at labor market opportunities. Women are less likely to work. They earn less than men for similar work, we know that, and are more likely to be in poverty even when they work because their salaries or pay would be less than their male counterparts. Opportunities due to political and legal rights. Women in many countries still lack independent rights to own land, to manage property, to conduct business, or even travel. Sometimes they have to seek their husband's permission to travel. So sad. Women are missing in the financial sector. I'll give you some statistics. Risa has already given us some. Worldwide, we see the ownership of a bank account for women around 47%. For men, it's higher at 55%. In sub-Saharan Africa, ownership of a bank account for women around 30%, and these are averages, and for men, 39%. So the gender gap here in sub-Saharan Africa is 9% ownership of a bank account. This is showing us that the gender gap in sub-Saharan Africa is higher than the world gap. We look at Middle East, ownership of a bank account for women is a very small 9%, while for men it's 19%. And then in South Asia, women 37%, men 55%. But what is this now showing us? That sub-Saharan Africa is bad, but it's not as bad as the Middle East. Let's look at closer to home. We come to the Southern African Development Community. Ownership of bank accounts. We are looking at South Africa and Mauritius being the highest by far at around 80% women ownership of bank accounts. Botswana and Swaziland in the 40s. DRC and Tanzania being the lowest, around 11 and 10%. Let me look at the fifth issue, development of rural savings groups. And this has also been mentioned before. Development of our SMMEs, as we commonly refer to them, can spur economic growth and lower unemployment. In many of our small and developing countries, such as Lesotho, we know that rural informal groups are very active in mobilizing villagers into informal savings groups. Women here are seen to have much more informal savings mechanisms than men, as they take the lead in these savings and investment schemes. And then another, and the last of the issues I wanted to highlight for you, we have the emerging use of mobile money or digital financial services. And we have heard over time that mobile money is now a potential solution to financial access in many of our African countries. In fact, we know that in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, mobile money penetration is very high. Looking at the statistics, female mobile money users are at around 91%. I think, Lisa, you've already mentioned some of the statistics around this area. In Tanzania, mobile money users being women at 76%, Uganda 69%. Now, let me just highlight the challenges around women financial exclusion of our entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. We have gender unresponsive budgeting, and I'm so glad our ministers are here because this now is talking to them. Collection of budget revenues and allocating expenditures is done in a manner that does not address persistent inequalities between girls and boys, as well as between women and men. So in this regard, then, women remain persistently marginalized and disadvantaged because our national budgets are not addressing our issues. We have legal impediments. Perhaps I may not even go into many of those. We have heard about just how we are disadvantaged in terms of legal laws that are in our respective countries, and this makes it harder for us to raise collateral. And we look at pricing of credit, and this is where I come in a lot. We see prohibitively high interest rates, which adversely affect women entrepreneurs more because they are mainly the ones who own small businesses, which find it harder to raise the finance because they are perceived as high risk. So this is in the financial sphere where we are operating from. Along with this, we have gender unresponsive products. Our financial sector is not producing products and services that are tailored for women's needs. So we need to address those issues. Then we have the unpaid care work, where our women entrepreneurs still need to do household chores even after all the hard work they do in their businesses. When they get home, they have to tend to ill members of their households. They have to tend to children. They have to look after their husbands here. And this situation gives rise to intergenerational impediments as girls do much more unpaid work. I mean, we don't even see just how much we do. We don't get paid for looking after our husbands and our children. And then most importantly, and this has come up often in our discussions, it's lack of data. We don't realize just how important data is to help us to generate, to helps us to inform policy. Now in the financial sector, it's even worse. We find that financial sector players do not have disaggregated data that is sufficient to inform policy. So we find that we don't know exactly how many women are accessing the financial systems and what products are they accessing and why are they not able to access others. So this makes it very difficult for policymakers to formulate gender-responsive policies that would address our gender gap. I will go quickly before Vuisa starts looking in my direction. Let me say something about our gender-responsive budgeting. Here we are really trying to impress upon policymakers. Let's see how we can plan, draft, implement, and evaluate our national budgets so that they can take into account gender issues in society. It's only about saying, let us be aware of what the issues are around women, girls, and men and women, so that we can try and be gender responsive even in the allocation of our national budgets. And we're not really saying separate budgets, but let us be responsive to what the needs of the women are. Then we look at addressing legal impediments, and we had Honorable Deputy Minister yesterday. She talked us through SA's laws, which as far back as 1995-96 already addressed the inequalities. In Lesotho, we only had the law in 2006, the legal capacity of married persons, and this gave women the right to enter into contracts without the consent of their husbands. They could become directors of companies, and this had not previously been done. And then in terms of unpaid care work, really it's also talking to government and also the private sector, bringing services closer to the people in the rural areas so that they don't have to go far, to collect water, they don't have to go far to collect wood, and they don't have to travel long distances for medical services, so that they can have a little bit more time to attend to their entrepreneurial businesses. And then in terms of disaggregation of data, it is important from the financial sector regulatory point of view to impress upon our financial sector players to have this disaggregated data in terms of the breakdown, women, girls, boys, and men, who is accessing what. And this would help us to ask those financial sector players, design products that are going to assist our women entrepreneurs. And then another important area that we want to look at is financial education and literacy. I mean, we have forums like this, but it was raised by someone yesterday, but where are the rural women? You see, they are not in here now. So we have to go to them in the rural areas with our financial education, our literacy programs, to reach out to them and to make them to empower them to understand, even when they go to the formal sector. But we are saying the rural women, let's try and address their rural needs. Let's bring products to them that are in the rural areas. So we have to empower them to know what they should ask for, even when they go to the financial service providers. And then just before I close, let me say a little bit about AFI, because that's what put me here. I was invited in my capacity as the member of the Gender Committee on Women's Financial Inclusion by the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. So AFI is a grouping of some 94 countries and 115 regulatory institutions worldwide. So in some of the countries, you have more than one regulator. As we know, in South Africa, we have the Reserve Bank and the Financial Services Board. So in other countries also, we have more than one regulator in the financial sector. So this alliance was founded in 2008 as a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded project to advance the development of smart financial inclusion policies in developing and emerging countries. In 2011, in furthering its objectives, AFI members collectively adopted the Maya Declaration. And this was a statement of intent to make financial inclusion a centerpiece of national efforts to reduce poverty and promote economic stability. And in still trying to do more, in 2016, AFI adopted the Denarau Action Plan at the Global Policy Forum in Denarau in Fiji. This action plan provides guidance, measures, and encourages best practices that can be adopted to integrate national strategies and policies for women's financial inclusion. And out of this 2016 Global Policy Forum, the High-Level Action Committee on Gender and Women's Financial Inclusion was also born. And here we are targeting at steering women financial inclusion. Our committee works very closely with the working groups within AFI. These focus on peer learning, and this is part of peer learning, so they are really trying to harp on. Some countries are more advanced than others, so let's learn from each other. So there's a lot of peer learning. There's emphasis on financial inclusion data, which we have seen is a major hindrance, consumer protection, and digital financial services. Now let me just conclude. A lot has been said about lack of access to credit, but we know why this is the case. Banks do not target the very small consumers. So those small consumers, our small entrepreneurs, have to find other avenues for financing. And with the recent financial crisis, we know that the financial sector regulators have had to implement, have had to have more regulation enforced. Know your customer, lending has to be secured. We need more reporting just so that we can try and avoid the crisis that happened around 2008. So banks will not be the financiers for our small entrepreneurs because they are going to require all of these details that perhaps the small entrepreneur is not able to produce as yet. So we need other avenues, and we are saying our rural savings groups for the smaller entrepreneurs, let's target these small rural savings groups where we already have amassed some savings. So let's move away from consumption spending. Let's go into investments. The rural savings groups should establish their small enterprises within the rural areas. This will generate employment for us in the rural areas, and it will even remove the need for people in the rural areas going into the urban centers. So we can generate the employment there in the rural areas, and we can even finance that our small projects within the rural areas. So Vuyiswa has stood up. Thank you very much.
The thing is, I did allow it to go on because it was quite a master class in financial inclusion. And you know, it actually covered a lot of the questions that I would have been asking the panel. So if I don't, Mateo, please don't go away. Please get back on stage, and if they can just issue with a handheld mic. I'd also like to call on our panelists as well to continue the discussion. Now, as I call up the panelists to come up, I also want to try and help this process, because I know we are the session between you and tea. So I'm going to make sure that we do get some audience questions to go. So I'm going to drop hints so that you guys can mold some questions so they have more engagement from the audience. So I'd like to first call up, we've already met Mama Tabo. Now I'm going to call up Anna Marie Chinzero. You guys have your programs, so you should look at the profiles. My good friend Polo Leteka to come up to the stage, and Tumi Safolo to come up to the stage. A round of applause for them, please. And I'll make sure that I do my best not to take up too much time. We've got 15 minutes of this panel, 5 of which I want to give to our panelists, just to give deeper context to some of the issues based on some of the discussions that have already been raised by Mama Matabo, but also they came here with an agenda around financial inclusion, so that we get more participation from you. I can tell you now that some of the questions I was intending to ask, which I'm not going to do, but I'm going to drop hints to everybody in the audience to perhaps bring them up, because I'm pretty sure they are on your minds, are questions of inclusion for youth, affordable data, Bitcoin, the influence of overtrading in financial inclusion currently that's going on globally. But let me just leave those to you to kind of marinate around so that you can ask more questions from the audience. So let me kickstart the panel with you, Polo. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good. First of all, congratulations on all the wonderful work your team is doing at IDF and the enabling environment you're creating for digital inclusion. But coming into this panel, what has been the motivation for the direction that your fund has now taken in looking broadly at these kind of solutions and creating allocations of funds to enable entrepreneurs to get into this particular space?
Thanks, Visa. So perhaps by, to give context and a bit of background. So we've been around since 2008, investing in entrepreneurial businesses, focusing not exclusively but primarily on women-owned businesses. And we've traditionally invested in all sectors of the economy across the 9 provinces of South Africa, and we're now venturing into the rest of the subcontinent. And what has become quite evident is that if we do not embrace technology and use technology as an enabler, to our businesses, we might actually just be throwing money away, because technology is disrupting every sector of the economy. And it is said, in fact, that if your business is not technology enabled in the next 3 to 5 years, you might not have a business. So it's really an imperative that we shift our focus towards investing in technology. And we're seeing quite a lot of exciting creative things coming out from young South Africans, both young men and women. So we're quite proud of that as well.
Brilliant. Dumi, coming to you as someone who focuses a lot of energy on enabling businesses, how does this particular topic shift and change the way you guys look at who and what you fund from an enterprise perspective at the fund?
Thank you. So many of you who were there yesterday had a presentation around the Masizane Fund. And one of the things that's at the ethos of our fund is collaboration. So IDF and ourselves have had a very long-standing relationship. We believe that for every R1 we invest, when we convince a partner to invest with us, then our rand will go further. So that's one of the things that, as a private sector fund, we have done exceptionally well, not only in the private sector, leveraging funds, but also in the public sector. Our government here in South Africa has got a host of programs available, offering grants across various sectors. So we have made it our task to unlock those grants for our clients, because also when you're looking at funding, it's not always about a loan. There's different types of funding available, and you have to make sure that you attract the right type of funding for your particular business. So the appeal to the ladies in the room is that do your research around what is available and what's going to work for your business. Because what I offer in our fund may not be applicable to your business. And a colleague earlier yesterday from the IDC said, this is our mandate. So once you understand the mandates of the different funds, understand what they offer, then you can see what's going to work for you. Don't just always take what's on the table. The other thing is that from a digital perspective, one of the aspects that as a fund we have recognized is that the women sitting in this room probably have access to a whole lot more information and access to capital than the average South African,
You'd like to think, but
African women.
I don't know if I'd get an agreement on that, though.
So the point that I wanted to make was, rural women are probably the most excluded. And one of the ways we have found is to work with the microfinance institutions in the country who offer solutions, funding solutions to women in rural areas. They go to the women. They don't wait for them to come to them to give them money for their businesses. So we give them, as part of my portfolio in wholesale funding, we give them funding for that specific purpose. So there's a wide range of offerings that we bring to the party as a funder, but the most underlying aspect is that we collaborate. So if somebody said yesterday, find a passionate woman or a passionate individual in that organization who will help you, who will support you, who will buy into your idea. So if we can't help you, you know what, I'll say, I know somebody who can help you and make those connections for you. And once you do that, then you will find it a lot easier to unlock the funding that you're looking for.
Brilliant. Now, Mama Taba, within a minute, I want to kind of ask you a particular question. Is there a future for central banks in a world where the digital economy is run through public ledgers and things of the like? What are you and your colleagues discussing in your spaces around where the future of digital and financial inclusion, where it comes to the policy and regulatory space that you guys participate in?
Thank you. I think what we, as the regulators, really emphasize or we work towards is leveling the playing field. So we don't actually innovate in terms of DFS, but we want to see the market enabled to undertake DFS. So whilst we would also take strides to ensure that we are as digitally included as possible, but we are trying to have the data. I think I want to emphasize the issue of availability of granular data. so that we can influence policy towards market players being able to put up products that would then address our financial inclusion through digital financial services. So as a central bank or as regulators ourselves, we really enable the level playing field. We work with
Brilliant.
communications authorities to ensure that they are also on board in terms of what products are coming up in terms of mobile money.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Brilliant. So as I go to the audience and I start thinking about coming through, I'm going to just come back to you, Polo, as well. Around Africa is obviously a young continent. We've got a lot of young people. It's very youthful. How do we enable more youth participation? Because the future of all of this discussion that we're doing, ultimately, we're going to have beneficiaries. How do we ensure that they participate in this new world? We know the stats, and they're shocking, the stats, unfortunately. But we know technology has a leapfrog opportunity. How do we enable that to connect to the youth?
So a number of things. I mean, it has to be a multi-pronged approach, in my view. We've already started hearing a lot about introducing entrepreneurship at a school level, because it is about your mindset. If your mindset is that you go to school, you go to university, and you work for somebody, entrepreneurship doesn't become one of the first things you think of as a career. So I think shifting the mindset and educating people around
I think
entrepreneurship.
you should talk to Sis Judy while you're making that comment, because she must listen to this one. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And also, we are starting to see a lot of youth getting into robotics and coding,
Brilliant.
which is the future. They say that every career, is going to be, if you do not know how to code, if you're an architect, you have almost useless skills. So you need to be able to convert your architectural capability into code form, because that's how the world is going to be. Same thing with accounting and things like that. And we're seeing a lot of youth in this space. We're seeing a lot of youth in the, what do they call it? Not artificial intelligence, the other one.
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality, yes, exactly. And again, when you look at gaming, which is, virtual reality is found primarily in the gaming space. And gaming having now become a global sport, is recognized as a sport now. And who are the people there? It's the youth. So I do think that youth in one form or the other are already making their way into the space. But I also do think that we need to deliberately go out there. I spoke earlier about when we started our business, we primarily, not exclusively, focused on women. And we had to be very deliberate in our messaging. Because what we found is that when, people talk about funding is available, women tend to think, oh, it's for the guys, right? So we had to be very deliberate in saying that actually we're looking for women entrepreneurs to invest in. And as a result, all of a sudden they came out of the woodworks. They had been there all along. They just thought they have to sit on the sidelines while the boys. So I think similarly, we need to go out and deliberately say to youth,
Brilliant.
These are the opportunities that are available, because we have seen results. I mean, I like sharing this statistic. It's always a breaking point for me, that we are the only institution in South Africa that I'm aware of that has got more than 70% of our money invested in women-owned businesses. And it's something that a lot of institutions have spoken about for many years and have failed to achieve. Yes, and for us, I think it was deliberate. So if we are serious about including youth, we have to be deliberate in our messaging. And Osman Tabo made a point earlier. I don't know how I should call him Mema Tabo or I'm Sotho, she's Sotho, so we're very sensitive about these things. So she spoke about, you cannot expect to find rural women in this room, because firstly, they don't know about the conference, and secondly, even if they knew about it, they probably don't have the means to make their way here. So we have to go to them. So similarly, you cannot call a conference in Century City and expect youth in Kailicha to make their way here. You have to go to where they are. So we have to be quite deliberate, I think.
Well, we'll talk to Tumi after the conference. Maybe she can make a plan. I'm going to open up to the audience. I'm going to take questions from each side of the room. Quickly, 3 questions, and then we're going to do closing remarks. Any questions? We'll start on the far left, of your left, my right. Any questions? I don't see a hand. There's a question here. That's one. Let me check this side. I'm coming back to you. On your right, my left, any questions from this side of the room? Okay, we'll take a second question there. Third question, and I'm going to close the questions. Anybody else interested? We good? Let's take the two questions. We'll start with you, ma'am. There's a mic there.
Could the panel advise on the future of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the security thereof?
We'll give that to the policymaker because I think the rest of us might be underqualified.
To put it kindly, yes.
There's a mic, there's a question in front here. I would still like to take one more question if anyone has that question. Otherwise, I'll have to ask it myself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Micheline Barnes. I work at Old Mutual as a qualified chartered accountant. And my question is a bit more broader, and especially for the fellow chartered accountant as well. Traditionally, we've been groomed that you're going to go into the accounting stream or tax or whatever. And entrepreneurship is the future. We need more entrepreneurs to grow the economy, to create jobs, and to lift our people out of poverty. So, as how do we break away that stereotypical view of what a chartered accountant is? As an example, my husband told me about this role that was available where he works, and then his director said, "Oh no, a chartered accountant can't do that." Or maybe an engineer can't do that. And it can apply to any form of qualification that's seen as so technical. And how does one break away? And then how does someone who's come through the ranks and seen as these are traditional routes to follow become an entrepreneur? And maybe you're also risk adverse. So the safest option I think of is property investment, but for that you also need lots of, and coming back to our topic, finances. But how do you condition these traditional technical fields to think more innovatively and become entrepreneurs?
Brilliant. Thanks, sir. All right, so we'll start with the Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, wow, these are topical issues now. But we know that...
But can I go, before you go on, is there Bitcoin in Lesotho? Just my ignorance. I'm just checking.
We have seen invitations.
Oh, okay. All right. Just double check.
We have seen them in the papers and we're like, what is going on here now? So I mean,
Just checking,
from
just
the
checking.
regulatory point of view, these are currencies that are not real. Not real in the sense that, I mean, as
Not
a central
tangible.
bank, I have to say, a currency is backed up by something.
That's the point, yeah.
So these don't have any backing, and we are really struggling with trying to understand now why are they coming up, how are they used. These are some currencies or transactions through the internet, and it's really challenging the regulators because we know that perhaps they're offering an alternative form of currency, but at least we should know what they are doing.
Yeah.
And then be aware of the risks.
Yeah.
Because as financial sector regulators, the main emphasis is to protect the public. So we have to understand, read, and try and do a lot of research so that we can be throwing caution to the public, get into them knowing that you are likely to lose or these are the risks. So I think they are really, they're coming on, but they're providing a real challenge for regulators just to understand the risks.
Yeah. I think my only tip would be just be careful who you take advice from. Suddenly, there's a lot of experts in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency coming out now, and it's just another kind of easy, opportune kind of gap because the regulators only wait for the complaints. Typically, a complaint is generated when you lose money. It never. While you think you're going to make money or you're about to make money, you never complain, and suddenly you find your voice when a whole lot of money is gone because we were sold a particular story. So just be careful. The question on CAs?
Maybe I can kick off. I think that yesterday, if you were here, you would have known that when Dr. Dlamini shared her story, nobody could have thought a medical doctor could end up being the entrepreneur that she is. So there are many examples, and I think when it comes to breaking that mindset, it's about telling the stories of those individuals who've walked those journeys as widely as possible. Entrepreneurship, for example, for me was never a foreign idea because I grew up, my father was an entrepreneur. So it wasn't something that I looked at and I thought, oh, it's risky. So if I went to my dad, and I went, which I did, and I said, I'm going to start a business, he didn't say don't. So, and the examples are there. I dare say, even in Black communities, those that grew up in townships, we would have known entrepreneurs in the townships that are quite well known. So it's just about sharing and reinforcing those stories. When it comes to traditional careers, your accounting profession or degree or engineering will always help you in whatever entrepreneurial journey you walk, because you, as an entrepreneur, will likely be able to understand the finances in your businesses far better than somebody who isn't trained in that profession. So it can only be an advantage. And when it comes to the issue of risk, there's risk in everything. You may think you're working for a corporate and you're safe, you're going to get your salary every month, but we all know corporates go through changes. So I always say the younger you are, take the risk, take the dive. You've got nothing to lose. You've actually got the qualification. So if things don't work out, you can go back and look for a job. We need to be stop being scared of taking those risks. And as a funder, we also always encourage entrepreneurs to understand the risks in their business. So when you meet me and you say, I'm looking for funding for an agribusiness, and you say, I understand, you tell me, I understand that these are the top 5 risks, and this is how I'm going to mitigate them. You are singing music to my ears.
Yeah.
Automatically,
for that.
I will find a way to help you. So understand the risks in your business, and funders will find a way to help you. So I'd really just like to encourage that those that do own media and do own platforms to give the opportunity for, we have, South Africa is spoiled for choice when it comes to entrepreneurs. There are so many. Many of the listed companies on the JSEs were started by an individual. So we've got to start spreading the stories and remembering where we come from.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Sumi. Now, again, I want to wrap this panel up on a high, but I was actually going to say, as long as you don't work for KPMG, you should be fine. Sorry.
For KPMG.
Just in closing, I just want to give each of the panelists just a quick 30 seconds, just to give hope to the women in the room around how it is that you will enable more women participation, to participate in the financial services, but also through financial inclusion in the space that you occupy. So we'll start with you, Dumi, and then we'll come back down to Polo.
Okay. So our fund is led by a woman. 7 of the key decision makers on our executive, 4 of the 7 are women. We have a bias towards women. We are always looking for women-owned businesses. There's only one thing that we always look for, is that women or any entrepreneur should just know the numbers of your business. There's nothing more disheartening than when you get asked a question and you say, call my accountant, call this person. Know what the numbers of your business is telling you. And therefore, you may not have everything else, but if you know the numbers in your business, a funder will find a way to help you around that. So as ladies, if you're running your own business and you don't know how much revenue you made last month and you don't know how much profit you made last month, please fall in love with that kind of information. That is the biggest appeal, because that will help you access a lot more funding than you probably are accessing now.
Yeah. Matao?
Dumi's point is really important. We need that information. Your proper financial records are what are going to lead you to influence a financier to support you. So that information is critical. From the regulatory point of view, also we still insist on proper regulation of our financial sector because we want to protect our consumers. Financial literacy is another important area. Yeah. We really need to go out there and teach the ladies, our entrepreneurs, what options are available for them at the lowest point of entry, so that as they grow, then they can look to other more major financiers. So let's start them at the grassroots and grow them so that they can actually then look for other financing options.
Brilliant.
Great. Geez, there's so much one can say. We started our business because we saw a gap in the market. We were told that there are no black entrepreneurs worth investing in. We were told that there are no women entrepreneurs worth investing in. We looked at ourselves and we thought we are black and we are women and we think we're worth investing in. And we do not think that there's anything unique about us. I mean, look at this room full of women who potentially can be invested in. So we were very clear about identifying the problem, or rather defining the problem that we are trying to solve. And therefore, in the process of defining the problem, then identifying the opportunity. I'm telling you this story because what we find is that people do not spend enough time thinking about the problem, and therefore taking it a step further and then saying, how does this problem present itself as an opportunity to myself? And this is what typically funders and investors are looking for. So you need to have a very clear sense of what that problem is, and therefore what that opportunity is. Importantly, you then have to be able to quantify it, quantifying the opportunity. Just because your next door neighbor has opened a franchise doesn't necessarily then mean that franchises are the way to go. So understanding and quantifying the opportunity so that you can convince an investor that when they give you money, they will get it back and some. I cannot overemphasize what has already been said around the numbers. I often say numbers tell the story.
Yep.
If you cannot talk to your numbers, then you do not have a story to tell. And that's really what investors primarily are looking for. And I think importantly, what we find is that a lot of entrepreneurs actually do not do their due diligence. So your typical South African entrepreneur, and in fact probably across the world, will say, well, you know, banks don't want to give us money, nobody wants to give us money. And I often say, have you spent enough time understanding what your financing needs are, right? So your financing needs could be, if you're trying to finance a contract, it won't make sense for you to go to a venture capitalist or a private equity player. You probably want to go to a bank. If you're looking for working capital, it's the same thing. If you're looking for patient capital or capital that is here today and you only have to return it in 5 years' time, then maybe the bank is not the place to go. So understanding what your, what the funding environment looks like, what your funder is looking for. If there's one funder on the one hand who's looking to make IRRs of 25%, 30%, and you go to them and you present them with an opportunity of a prime linked return, you're talking to the wrong person. So spending the time understanding the funding landscape or the investor landscape is very, very important. Visa, if I may, you said 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
So
10 seconds.
We're in Africa. This is relative. This is relative. I wanted to touch on the question that the young lady from Old Mutual asked. And I often worry when I feel like we are under so much pressure to all of us become entrepreneurs. And I think that is the wrong type of pressure. It is said that in the world, only 4% of the world population are real entrepreneurs. Only 4%. Statistics say that. So the 96% should not feel under too much pressure to join the 4%. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that you're not part of the 4%, but I'm just saying that be careful not to put yourself under pressure unduly. I think when you're an entrepreneur at heart, you know it at a very early stage. I knew when I was probably 11, 12 years old that there is no employer that can contain me. So although I went into employment, it was really to learn the skills that I required in order for me to go out and actually run my own business. So, and we also should not feel like being an accountant is not sexy. You know, it's important. I'm a trained accountant, by the way. It's important. When I started my business, I hate accounting. I mean, I did it because, we didn't have, it was the thing to do at the time. Yeah. Actually, the reason why I did accounting, by the way, is that when I was reading up on career prospects, I was looking for the job that would make me the most money, rich quickly. So apparently, chartered accountants, I was told, were the biggest money makers. So that was almost how. Yeah. Then, of course, when I was doing my articles, I realized that it's not me, right? My personality is not an accountant, but the skills, the technical skills I gained, were so critical in my ability to actually run my business properly, professionally, right? Because when you're an accountant, you become pedantic about processes, systems, and things like that. And a lot of entrepreneurs get that wrong right from the beginning. So it's not a bad thing for you to be in a job, learn how an organization runs, so that if you do become an entrepreneur, ultimately,
Go out there and shine. So thank you very much to our panelists. We're going into, we'll be guided by Bonnie around the tea break. Please go and visit the exhibitors outside. You'll find both Masisiza and IDF Capital there if you want to know more information. I myself am launching South Africa's first equity crowdfunding platform. It's called Uprise Africa, so uprise.africa. So again, always happy to chat. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome panel discussion. So I'm not going to steal any more time because Irene is like, she's panicking about our time today because we have so much to get through, which means we're going to cut our break a bit short so we just have enough time to come out, have a chat, have a bathroom break, grab a tea, quick, fast, and in a hurry. And we should be back in about, I think we're going to do a 5 to 10 minute break.